Welcome back to Echo Ridge. Today, we're going to build a rust melter. Well, at least we're going to attempt to. As you may remember from our last couple of episodes, we hit our culmination point with the series because, well, we dominated our geothermal heat pump. So I figured let's do one big final project for this series as sort of a going away party. Now you may notice that a lot of the map is cleared out, and that's because I've had quite a long time. We're up at cycle 1169. And the reason why is because of up here. Because I also had to clear all of this up to allow this volcano to start dispensing all of its magma. Because, well, I need even more magma than this, and I need the magma to raise in temp. If you remember, there was a lot of hot rock in this area. So the first thing I had to do was build a room around it and vacuum everything out. Once I did that, it was a lot safer to be able to go in, dig, and then sweep everything up. You'll notice there's a lot of hot obsidian here in the bottom of this room. And that's there because, well, I didn't want to bring a bunch of 1,000 or 1,500 degree obsidian up to our standard sweep drop-offs. So I added an automatic dispenser here, and it's just set to abyssalite and obsidian, which was basically everything that was in this area. The only other thing we did in the background is set up our sort of rust drop-off point. We're sitting at 270 tons of rust. So I just set this automatic dispenser on, hey, go grab all the rust in the planetoid and drop it here. Well, when these tiles aren't here, the dupes can't go get it. So we'll eventually use an auto sweeper system and a conveyor loader to insert our rust into our eventual rust melter. And that sort of begs the point of why we're melting rust to begin with. Well, the reason is because when we melt 1 kilo worth of rust and bring it to a temperature over 1534.9 degrees, we're going to be given 1 kilo of molten iron in return. Now, there is another way to melt rust already built into the game, and that is using the rust deoxidizer. The rust deoxidizer turns 750 grams of rust and 250 grams of salt into 400 grams worth of iron, which is a little bit more than a 50% ratio. Well, if we do it the manual way, we're getting 100%, which means more iron, which in the end will mean more steel. So that's why we melt rust. But full disclosure before we begin this project is, this is going to take a lot of work and time. Time that you may not want to spend just for a little bit more iron. There is nothing wrong with setting up a rusty deoxidizer station, even if you don't need the oxygen or the chlorine gas, just to churn through all your rust on your colony to grab that iron ore. This is definitely a for funsies endgame project. You'll notice that all the tiles in here are built out of obsidian. The materials that you're going to be using to build the rust melter are very important because you're working with magma. Anytime you're working with magma, you'll want to make sure that all your buildings, such as ladders, are made out of either obsidian or steel. Now, insulated tiles don't matter as much because they don't transfer thermals in the same way as a normal tile, but rest assured they do actually transfer thermals. It's just very, very slow. So I recommend using nothing but obsidian and steel where you can. I'm also going to be using the Priority Zero mod. It is a great mod for these purposes because you can sort of plan out your bigger builds without having the duplicates execute anything. And the first thing we're going to be building is our magma dropper. But before I do, you need to understand the concept of the magma blade. You can sort of see the phenomenon here that the way the tiles stack. And the reason why is due to the viscosity of magma. So when we talk about magma blades, we're literally talking about how far magma will flow, no matter how much is in a single tile. And the answer is 10 tiles. The way I like to look at it is 9 plus 1, with the 10th tile being where we're actually going to drop magma. So in our first part of our build here, we're going to build where the magma is actually going to come out, which is going to be something like this. Now when we're designing this, the magma is going to fall and start to form its blade right under this single tile here. So this is where our 9 plus 1 is going to go. Yes, you could definitely just keep saying 10, but I like the 9 plus 1 method because it's here on the 10th tile that we know the magma is going to fall out. We're also going to need to have a method to control how much magma we want to come out. And that's going to be about half of this build. Because otherwise, the magma is just going to keep flowing out, come down through here, and just keep draining. So what we are going to do is put in a steel door right here on the 9th tile, and we'll use some automation to open and close this door. Now, before we get to the next part of the build, we need to discuss how we're going to be melting the rust to begin with. We're going to be sending this cold rust through some tiles here in the way of a counterflow heat exchanger. That rust is eventually going to loop around on some rails where we're going to be heating up some tiles, and that rust will eventually get hot enough and turn into the molten iron. Let me get the next part here built so you can see a better visualization. And here we go. Our cold rust is going to start on some rails and come through these tiles just like this, and eventually make it down to this, what I'm calling the iron catch, before going into these very, very hot tiles and start to circle around. Once they get hot enough, because of the magma transferring its thermals through these tiles, it will melt into molten iron. Once it does, it'll splash down into this sea catch. Well, the last place the rust was coming through that's not hot enough yet to turn into molten iron will be these tiles. So as soon as the molten iron hits this catch, it's going to turn into solidified, refined iron. From there, we are going to have an auto sweeper and conveyor loader system pick it up and send it back through these rails, which will then be heating up the iron coming through the other side. The only reason we use the counterflow heat exchangers is to make this system more efficient. Because if you can preheat the materials you're trying to melt, well, you're not going to need as much magma. Let me also put in some rails. I'm going to be using a mixture of iron ore and steel, only because I only have about 24 tons of steel. Up here, I'm sort of safe to do that, for the simple reason the iron and the rust will not be hot enough to melt any of these rails, knowing the fact that we know when iron melts, which we know is around 1540 degrees. But once we get closer to this whole system, we are going to be using steel. Alternatively, we could be using wolframite, but we only have 10 tons of that too. And it's going to continue, and like we said, it's going to go through the C-trap and then up through here. And now I'm going to have to build a little loop system, which always takes me a second. And the key is I do not want the loop system to be connected to this C-trap, because remember, we're trying to heat this rust up. This rust we want as stable as possible. So I think I'm going to make this trap a little smaller, and that way I can put the bridge right here. And so the first part of our loop will be right here. Remember, anytime that you're building one of these loops, you will need a directional bridge that just lets the materials know which direction they're flowing. Now you'll notice that when I'm building this, I have to keep going from priority 5 to priority 0. And that's because in addition to the priority 0 mod that I use, I also use one called reset build priority. So it's not too bad of an idea if you are using priority 0 on a larger project like this to disable reset build priority. But be forewarned, once you set it to 0 on priority 0 and you start building stuff on your normal gameplay, you're gonna quite often forget to bring it back to building priority 5. But for these larger projects, I think we can use the default ONI method of once you put down a building and you get back into building, it'll still be set at the same priority you last set it as. But back where we were before, remember, we're going to have an auto sweeper and a conveyor loader picking up the molten iron, and it's going to be sent right back through these tiles, hence the counterflow heat exchange. Oh, I suppose I did not need to use steel for all of that. We'll use the iron, just like we did on the beginning of the rails before. I'm sure nothing will go wrong. And this iron will be as cool as your rust coming out on the other side, but I wanted to build a debris chiller system with this anyways, so I'm going to end up dropping the iron all the way down here, and then I'll have an auto sweeper and conveyor loader system here to pick it up and move it around. You could alternatively just send it on rails if you have an excess of materials, but, well, I don't. So the old gravity rail method works better for me. I have a couple more tiles here to fill in, and I think that looks just about good. Now let's talk about the automation that's going to control the magma flow. The magma is going to drop out of here. It's going to extend the 9 tiles, and then want to drop just a little bit. In fact, I think I'm going to put this airlock over in the 10th tile. That way that end of the blade is ready and we're not pushing more magma than we intend to. But the magma's then going to drop when this door is open and land on this mechanized airlock. But we need a way to shut this door once we have enough magma. And we're going to be using a hydro sensor for it. Hydro sensor is going to say, hey, we have plenty of magma. Go ahead and turn off. Once again, we're using steel automation wires because we don't want any of these wires to melt. And once the magma is sitting in this tile, it's going to be transferring all of its heat here. Well, we want to be able to drop that magma for two reasons. First, because if the magma drops below 1400 degrees, it's going to turn into igneous rock. And we don't want to form any solid tiles or debris in this system. But there's also not really a good reason to transfer the thermals once it gets below the 1540 degrees because that's the temperature we need to melt the rust itself, which then says we should be using a thermosensor. And that thermosensor is going to say, hey, the magma is too cold now, drop it. And once it does, it's going to come down here and go into this magma blade. More on this in a little bit. There is a problem with this though, because once the thermosensor says, hey, open the door is going to stay open because there's not going to be any hot magma waiting for it. So I need a way to tell the door to close back. And there are a few different ways you've probably seen on how to do this. The way I like to do it is by using a timer sensor. We combine that timer sensor with an AND gate, then we connect each one to an input and then the door to the output. I'm going to build these automation pieces so that we can see all of them in action, and it'll help us get a much better idea on how this is going to work. And another great part of using Priority 0 is none of these tiles are built yet, so we can build it in stages. But I do know eventually I'm going to need some scaffolding, so I might as well build that now as well. And notice, we're on Priority 0, so I have to go back here and flip this to a 5. Now with the automation in place, you'll notice that the AND gate combined with the two sensors is opening and closing the door. Not exactly how we want it to look yet, and we'll be able to dial this in more once we have the system rolling, but for now, this is a great way to show you. Doors open when they receive a green signal. So the first thing we're going to need to tell our thermosensor is, hey, if the temperature is below 1540 degrees, we've used all the thermals out of the magma, so you can send a green signal. But remember, once that green signal is fired, we want to be able to shut the door. So for that reason, we're only going to have this door open. Keep in mind, it's going to be a lot quicker once we have power in here. Let's say 1 second out of every 30 seconds. In other words, the magma will drop when this hydro sensor says, hey, we don't have enough magma. In fact, we'll say when it's below 1 kilo. So that we just have one tile of magma here. Once it's above 1 kilo on this second tile, it's going to send a red signal, which will then shut the door. For now, I do not want any accidental spillage, so I am going to separate this and make sure that door stays shut. I also do not want any of these ladders in here because all they'll do is take more heat out of the magma. So we'll go ahead and deconstruct those. Then I'm going to add some of the finishing touches here, such as the power lines, which once again should be steel when you're in and around this magma here. And I think it might even be better to send this automation wire through the insulated tiles so the magma is not responsible for heating it up either. And then we'll do the same with the power wires. Once again, because it's going through insulated tiles, it probably doesn't need to be steel. So I'll put it in first like that, connect everything up. I just used the wrong thing. Connect everything up, and then from probably this point all the way up, I will end up using copper. But be very careful where you're putting things like copper, because that could end up being very, very bad. I can also start building some of our other buildings, making sure they are built out of steel. We'll have our auto sweeper here. So anywhere there is molten iron that solidifies, our auto sweeper will be able to grab it. Conveyor loader that's also built out of steel is going to end up sitting right here. Now remember, these buildings will need some cooling because they themselves create heat. And because we're in a vacuum, there's no environment to naturally cool the auto sweeper down. So you do need to provide some cooling. In this case, the conduction panel is going to work out perfectly will come through the auto sweeper, and then we'll end up cooling the conveyor loader. This is a cooling loop that will get plenty of use here in a little bit, but we're trying to put in a lot of the meat and potatoes for now. This area here will also need power, so we'll send it on up using steel because, once again, it's going through hot metal tiles. And I think everything on this side is ready to be built, so I will go through like this and then slowly start building these pieces here. I think we can reach all of them. Everything in there is built. Oh yeah, beautiful. And we could have kind of guessed that this was going to happen. Let's go ahead and remove that tile and let Tenchen out, and then try to make sure the dupes build it in the right order again. Now that we've finished that, I can start building these one by one, because the dupes will need to be able to reach all this. So I think this can be next, and the door. We also want to go and deconstruct as many of these ladders as possible, because remember, while the ladders were important for early scaffolding, they will drain heat out of the magma. And then slowly just start building everything in. Easy peasy. Keeping up on our sweeps, and then slowly starting to remove some of this scaffolding as well. And there's the guts to our rust melter. This system would melt rust. Now granted, we still have to put in our cooling loops and provide some power, and that's where our next stage of the build goes. When doing this, I have to remember the magma that's going to be coming out of here, and it's going to want to drop right through here. Now what we do with this magma is very, very important. Remember, every tile that comes out is going to have some significant mass. If you don't have enough cooling in here, you will end up overheating your steam turbines. Unless you just have an absolute butt ton of steam turbines, and I'm talking 5 to 10, you have to be very, very careful. So we know we have our 9 plus 1 for the drop. So we know this is where the magma will fall. And this is a notoriously problematic part to a lot of these builds. What to do with all that hot magma. If you try to use all of that hot magma and just send it to a steam room, unless you're rocking some thermium, you're going to end up overheating a bunch of components. So we're going to do something, well, a little different. Now, the idea is going to be that the magma is going to drop into these 2 mesh tiles. And what happens in the mesh tiles is if you have solid tiles here, and the magma, when it solidifies into igneous rock because it's too cold, will spit out the debris because you can't form debris behind a mesh tile. So we're going to force the igneous rock into this tile here. Now, full disclosure, this system is not great. If you drop too much magma into the mesh tiles at once, it'll solidify and form a tile. That's definitely not what we want. I'm also keeping this on the far side, so if it does end up breaking, my dupes will be able to get in there and fix it. Now I'm going to try a system where once all this debris is sitting here, we'll pull it out when we're ready for more heat that our steam turbines can handle. The issue is, if you just let all of the igneous rock drop in here, eventually it'll be too hot and it won't be able to solidify into its debris form anyways. So that's why this becomes a little tricky. Now I do not have any diamond. I would prefer to use diamond temperature shift plates in this case. So we're going to have to use our next best thing, and that will be steel. And that steel temperature shift plate not only is going to be drawing heat from the magma, but it's also going to be placing it into some metal tiles here. And I'm going to be controlling how much heat is in there using our wonderful metal doors. That'll also be connected to a major steam room. And I think it's going to look something like this. Now this is going to be a little finicky, but I am so petrified of this igneous rock because it's blown up in my face probably the last 2 or 3 attempts. So I wanted to try something a little different in this one. Now I will need some wonderful water because this tile is going to be sitting in its own steam bath if I do this just right. Now I'm going to try doing this by dropping some water in here. It doesn't have to be too killing much, and then putting the metal tile here and then sweeping up the rest. We'll see how that goes. All right, so we ended up with 150 kilos worth of water in this tile, which is okay. That'll end up being 150 kilos worth of steam pressure. But notice, even after this metal tile is built, the auto sweeper can still see inside of this tile. And because this whole area is a vacuum, we're going to be able to control how much heat is being sent into this room. We're also going to finish off some of the igneous rock by picking it up, throwing it in a conveyor loader, and then filtering it around the steam room as well. Starting to come together. I'm getting excited. The next part of the build is pretty standard fare. It's just a normal steam room with a thermo aqua tuner in it. Ah, man, I'd love to get another steam turbine in there, but oh well. Actually, I think I might be able to if I scooch it over like this and just cover one of the steam turbine's ports, and then I can fit 4 steam turbines. And this will sort of make sense because when you cover the ports, they can ingest hotter steam, and since the steam over here is going to be so hot, it works. I do have a heavy watt conductive wire on the ready. I've been upgrading all of the heavy watt wire to heavy watt conductive wire. First, to try to regain some of that sweet, sweet ore. But also, since we have metal volcanoes, we don't have to worry about our source of refined metal anymore. At least in terms of copper and aluminum. Now, I did just realize I am going to have a problem getting this wire where it needs to go. For the simple reason that, well, I don't want to cross any place that's covered with magma. And I can't put a heavy watt joint plate on these tiles because it'll end up transferring its thermals to the steam turbines. And if I put heavy watt joint plates here, they will draw out heat from the magma. Man, it'd really be nice to be able to destroy neutronium. Alternatively, I could have said, well, it doesn't really matter. I don't have to put all that power on the spine, but I kind of wanted to, so we're just going to end up only using the 3 steam turbines. And now that the steam turbine's not going to be touching this heavy watt conductive joint plate, we don't even have to worry about it transferring heat because everything out here is a vacuum. Which does remind me, we are going to need some conduction panels. They don't need to be built out of steel. At least there, we'll use aluminum. And then everything else in here is pretty standard. I am going to put the smart battery, and I think we're going to need 1 or 2 thermo aqua tuners. 1 for keeping all this cool, and 2 for the debris chiller. And the rest of this you've sort of seen before. We'll use a thermo sensor in here. It doesn't have to be built out of steel. And while the steam turbines will be connected to the batteries, the thermo sensor will also be able to tell the steam turbines when to turn on or off again, just in case it gets too hot in here. We're also going to use another thermo sensor, probably right here, and it's going to let us know when we can inject more heat. I.e., if it's too hot in here, we want to make sure that door stays open, or in other words, sending a green signal. So if it is above 220 degrees, send a green signal and open this door up. Our cooling loop for our, cooling loop thermo aqua tuner has a bunch of stuff to cool down, starting off with the steam turbines. Then we're going to have to keep this thermo aqua tuner cold, that conveyor loader. There's going to be another auto sweeper and conveyor loader system down here. We'll hypothetically say they'll be right there. Well, I guess not hypothetical, because if I'm putting them there now, they're staying there. So then our cooling loop is going to continue on, go through here, through that conduction panel, over, up, and then we have this stuff to cool. Now this is all made out of insulated obsidian just because we have a lot of it, and then we keep these things cool, and now all I have to do is get back to this point right here, which if I flip these conduction panels, I can make this look a little bit better. There we go. After a couple bridge flips and conduction panel flips, come out, go through, down, up, over, down, and through this last set of conduction panels here. And I think everything in the system that needs to be cooled is going to be cooled. Now, the other reason I wanted a debris chiller in here is because once we grab this igneous rock, it's going to be sitting around 1400 degrees or something silly. It's going to spread throughout this chamber over on rails. But the coldest the steam turbines will ever be able to get it to is 125 degrees. I'm going to set up some automation to make sure that's a thing, but after it is 125 degrees, actually, it'd be better if I kept it around 200 degrees. That way we're getting maximum power out of the steam turbines. We can then send it into a debris chilling system. We'll use aluminum for this for sure. And since this is all in a vacuum, I don't have to worry about surrounding these or anything. But that system's going to look pretty simple. We'll have our radiant pipes just go around and around and then join right back in. And the rails will be doing the exact same thing. I remembered another reason why I wanted the conductive wire here. It's because I need a power transformer. No reason why we can't just put that in here too. In an effort to keep everything as far away from this door as possible, I'll end up rerouting this sort of like this. Now for our rails, we are down to 10 tons of steel, so we're coming up a little short. I could use the aluminum ore inside the steam chamber. It has a melting temp of 1,000 degrees, and if we've gone over 1,000 degrees, we have big problems anyways. So we're gonna have all of that come in, keeping a little bit away from this door because the thermals will spike there. And then we can just start riding up and down. Actually, I sort of like this system better. That way the steam turbines are more likely to get an even flow of temps. In other words, hot rock will start here and end up over here before heading back, and then before one final pass to get every amount of thermals that we can out of it. And then we're just going to use a conveyor shutoff here. Well, actually right here, because you can't apparently build over the heavy watt conductive plate. This needs to be steel and needs to be flipped. It'll look something like this. Not as clean as I was hoping, but then we put the conveyor rail thermal sensor right here, and I'll be able to check to make sure those temps are perfect. I also like to have an emergency backup, and I'm only putting this in just in case. If for some reason we get to small scraps of magma and igneous rock, and let's say there's 0.2 of a kilo, that it's too small for the conveyor sensor to read, we need to have a just-in-case trigger. So that's going to be a timer sensor that says, hey, no matter what, once per cycle, let some rock through. I also realized I forgot the sensor up here. I'm going to be putting it, say, made out of steel, right here. And this is how we're going to be able to control how much heat is actually in these tiles. Definitely don't want to use copper wires. This is how it goes. Then you end up melting things, and bad things happen, and then there's chaos, and then everybody laughs. And now our rail system will continue. We'll have it come out and go the same path as the radiant liquid pipes until we just let it out, thanks to, once again, another timer sensor that's going to open and close this conveyor chute maybe once every 30 seconds. I don't know if we'll be able to get that kind of throughput, but it'll be interesting to see. We're also ready with our power here. Suppose aluminum for this part is fine. And then anywhere we need power in this facility, melter, we just throw that one line there. And I'm going to make sure this is steel until we're at least outside of it. And then everything else can be aluminum or copper just fine. We're getting close. We are getting really close. Love to see it. Steam turbines are telling me they have no place to empty their exhaust. I'm going to want to empty it right in front of this thermal aqua tuner because it's the closest to this door, and that's how we're going to be able to control the heat coming in. Something to keep in mind is the igneous rock it's pulling out is going to provide plenty of heat for this area, but we do eventually have to shut this door for the simple reason that this water, when it inevitably turns into steam, we have to make sure it's cool enough to make the igneous rock debris. The last rail I'm going to run is from here, because eventually I'm going to want to cool all the obsidian here. Some of it is 24, 25 degrees, but some of it is at 1300. So we're going to want to run that obsidian through this system as well. So in order to do that, we would just link up and have a 50-50 split. Maybe something like this. In fact, I can even bridge that on to make sure it doesn't empty on to this line unless there's no igneous rock. And since it looks like we're about done, the last thing I believe, unless I have massively forgotten something, is the temperature shift plates for this area. Now, right next to these tiles, I'm going to be using something with a little bit higher thermal conductivity that can withstand heat. Without me having any diamond, I'm going to use some steel temperature shift plates. Now, you'll notice here that I am connecting the temperature shift plates right up against the insulated tiles, which is not something I normally do. But in this case, I want to be able to get rid of the temperature out of this tile as best as possible. And I think igneous rock might be best for the rest. We have 314 tons, so this should be okay. And I say last things to do, but you know there's a few more things. Like we have to fill up the coolant loops. We have to put a bunch of water in here. It's a whole process. I suppose to fill the coolant loops, we can just put a little system down here. We'll fill this first one. Easy peasy. Now, we don't have a lot of options. Of course, I'd rather use super coolant, but we do have nectar on this planetoid, and the coolant requirements really aren't too bad, so nectar will work perfectly. So we'll select nectar, enable auto bottle, all the way over here. Where did you go? No. Oh, right here. We have our little nectar container. Oh, I realized something messed up on. We have to move this over because I completely forgot my liquid pipe thermosensors here and here. Oops. We'll put those in, and I need to make sure we're not actually dropping off any coolant quite yet because I want to make sure the thermal aqua tuners do not turn on. There we go. That is much better. We'll start off by saying if the nectar is above 5,000 degrees, go ahead and turn on. There's no medium in there for them yet, so this is good. We do need to keep an eye on this power transformer. You can see because it's generating heat, it is slowly going up in temperature, so I'm going to drop off at least one bucket of water until we figure out how much we actually want in here. And I think we're done in here. I'm sure I messed something up. We're going to take a good look at it before I shut this whole thing. Our nectar is starting to flow. I'll keep an eye on the cooling loops to make sure they're perfectly filled. And we figure out that amount is, we see how many tiles are in this room. For ease, we're just going to say it's 100 tiles. So if I want at least 50 kilos of steam pressure in each tile, well, I know I need 5 tons of water to fill each tile with 50 kilos worth of steam. And the way we can measure that is if we say this is 20 tiles long, which it is, well, 5 tons or 5,000 kilos divided by 20 tiles is 250 kilos. So I need to make sure there's 250 kilos of water in each tile. So we will go to water, enable auto bottle, and we're good. Another way you can do it, and probably a little bit easier, is just look at your vertical height. Notice it's 5 tiles high. If you want 50 kilos in each tile, 50 kilos times 5 is 250 kilos. So you'd put 250 kilos in each tile. A couple last minute checks. Automation is good here. Don't worry, we're going to be going through the functionality of this once we are done and walk through it step by step, especially considering we need to set a lot of these sensors. But this looks good so far. Everything's connected with power. Ooh. The rails are in. I suppose I can connect this. Our conveyor loader has no filters, so we don't have to worry about that coming in yet. Ooh, that needs to be connected for sure. And we're going to prime this whole room here by using our debris chiller thermal aqua tuner. All of our debris around our planetoid is sitting, cold. So I'm going to say I want these tiles and the debris coming out of it to be at least minus 20 degrees. Which is absolutely no problem for the nectar because it can go down to minus 82. We've got a little over 200 kilos, so I think we can be done here, which means all I have to do is seal this place up. Another thing to remember, and I know there's a lot of things in the system this large and complicated, is we are operating in a vacuum. So I don't have to worry about these metal tiles transferring anywhere. In a standard implementation, you'd have to surround this with a bunch of insulated tiles just to make sure you weren't bleeding your chill off into the regular environment. It's also the reason why we used conduction panels, but I dare say we are ready to turn this on. Well, I suppose I do need to seal this up, which definitely scares me, because if I have to get back there and fix any of this, it's going to be problematic. And here we go. Before I start, of course, we're going to give it a good old save. And what I like to do is do a save as to make sure that if you ever do need to come back to this save, you will be able to. And then all you have to do is make sure you go back to your original save. That way the autosaves overwrite on the correct save line. And I think we're ready. Little nervous. A million things could go wrong. We're going to see though. Doing some of the automation checks. We have our steam turbine set on 9070. Not that these things aren't going to be firing at all times anyways, because if it is above 225 degrees, turn these steam turbines on. Thermo sensor for the debris chiller is at minus 20. Thermo sensor for keeping the buildings nice and chilly, we'll just say 20 degrees. And then all we have to do to fire this system up is make a hole right here. Well, the dupes can't get there unless I allow them in the magma pit. It's not too bad. Now we just gotta pick up this obsidian. Like, seriously, dupes? And look at that, we only got minor scaldings. But as soon as Brian picks that up, we will end up shutting this. Now notice at the 9th tile, we only have 239 kilos. Doesn't matter how much pressure is up here. The pressure here is going to stay the same because of the magma blade. We do have the automation disconnected, but the hydro sensor says if it is below 1 kilo, send a green signal. Otherwise, send a red. Right now, it's sending a green signal, so it wants to open this manual airlock. which is exactly what we're going to do. Connecting that up, magma starts flowing down and filling up here. Now, as the system charges, notice we have one little igneous rock debris. That's going to happen. Do not worry, it will heat back up. Now, I do want to make sure this thermo sensor, at least to start, is something completely unrealistic like 1200. I'm just going to keep an eye on it because I want to drain as much of the heat into these tiles as possible to sort of charge them. Please tell me that automation wire is already built. Oh, no. Okay, this is okay. This is what we prepared for. Let me just disconnect here so that door shuts. Now, all of our debris turned into igneous rock because the magma got too cold, transferring everything around into the door, into the airlock, but that way we can get over here and fix this. This will work. It stinks because we'd already transferred almost 200 degrees into these metal tiles. All right, now much better, much better. This door is now open. We don't really want it open because we want to take all the heat and prime these tiles here. So we're going to say if it is above 1600 degrees, you can then send a green signal. Until then, just keep this door shut. And now I do want more magma. We have to keep charging the system. When we are charging the system, you end up wasting a lot of magma. But that is okay. I do need to make sure we get enough heat to turn this debris pile into magma again. So I'm actually going to flush this. I'm going to say if it's above 1 kilo, you can go ahead and shut it. And then if it is below 1540 degrees, you can open and dump that magma. And then once it hits that 30-second point, that door will open, all that magma will fall. Eventually, this igneous rock will turn back into magma the hotter we get it. Notice our blade's not going very far because it will take a few different dumps. The magma's at 1540. Door shuts. Notice we have about 2 tiles here. Did I end up powering that? I thought it would shut faster. Magma drops some more. The blade continues. This igneous rock is slowly heating up. It'll eventually turn back into magma. We're still heating up all of these tiles. The system really doesn't become efficient until you get that counterflow heat exchange going, because now when we send this rust through, it's going to start chilling down these tiles very quickly. In fact, I'm going to say 1480 degrees, so we drop it as it's still magma, but we can inject as much heat as we can in here. Notice the door flipper system is working perfectly. It waits until the heat is where it's supposed to be, and then once it is, within the 30-second period, it will open that door. If you're sitting with a lot of magma and you're not worried about it, you can even lower this a little bit to say 15 seconds, which I'll do in this case. Not that I'm sitting at a lot of magma. We are actually in an eruption cycle, though. Remember, our target temp is going to be around 1540 degrees. So I'm going to drop this to say 1580 degrees. We're starting to stabilize here. The outer metal tiles, the rust melters themselves, are sitting at 1480 degrees. These metal tiles are 1490. And notice we're not losing any more heat out of this magma. So I'll flip it back to say 1540. Sends its green signal. The timer hits, and we drop more. More magma gets dropped, slowly heating these tiles up even further. Now, another thing that's holding us back in this specific case is our magma is only sitting at around 1600 degrees. Normally, if you let this whole thing fill up even further, you'll end up with magma that's at 1726. It's just because it was touching so much obsidian when we formed all this, so it's lost a little thermal. Just the same way as the magma down here. See how it's at 1457 degrees? What I worry about with this particular system is that this volcano probably doesn't produce enough magma to outlast the rust melter to actually gain magma as the rust melter is on. All right, we're at 1560 degrees, so I am going to start the rust flow. I'm also going to make sure this is not on sweep only, so any spare rust that we have around the colony will once again be getting dropped. Might help if I power it, huh? Let's grab this little guy right here. We'll jump across. Thank you, Speedy Dupes. And our rust starts to flow. Notice the rust is at minus 14 degrees. So it's actually going to heat this tile up. And it's going to continuously do that until it gets all the way through here. Now, it's going to take me a few cycles of running this through to really get the counterflow heat exchanger working. And you'll see why here in 1 second. Speed it up, get it all the way going through. Notice that the conveyor rails are going through this last. And now look at the heat being drained out of this metal tile. The rust is sitting at 1100 degrees, which is great. Ooh la la. Ooh, I gotta build this metal tile back. Which is now gonna be slowly draining temperature out of this magma. We've got rust coming out at 1300 degrees. Notice the loop is not allowing any more rust to come on until one of its little baskets empty. We're at 1540. Ooh, I think we're about to see our first magma blade actually touch this. And watch me cry when that system doesn't work. Come on, magma blade. Just a little bit. And this is exactly what you want. You only want a very, very tiny bit of magma at a time to come through here. And yeah, we still don't have enough to drip over. So we wait for the next batch. 1580 degrees being transferred in. Notice the metal tiles are sitting at 1500. Slowly raising. But as soon as we have that first batch of molten iron, the whole system starts working better. In fact, I need to say iron on this auto sweeper. I'll go to ×3 speed. 1570. Oh, the rust is at 1520. Beautiful. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change this. Since we've got this whole thing preheated, I'm going to make it say it's a little hotter than the amount of heat we need to melt the rust. So I'm going to say 1560. And the reason why is because I want a little bit of molten iron right here in this thermosensor, so I can control when this door is opening and closing. So I'll match this one and say 1560. And then we'll come back there in a second. Oh, it's our first little magma drop. Notice it's just a little bit of magma coming through here. And so it instantly forms some debris. Oh yeah, the steam's already up at like 300 degrees or some ridiculousness. So let's say igneous rock. Oh, wait a minute. The thermal aqua tuner did not do a good job of heating this up. I think it might be better if I sent the rails through the water, because right now this is not going to do anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this from opening. Bloop. No more magma, please. And then we're going to send our duplicates through the magma shaft. Yes, that's a very technical name. Magma shaft. You heard it here first. And then I'm going to make sure this thing never opens, so that way we're not getting more magma coming out. So if it is below 0 degrees, you can open. Oh, it happened so fast. We just got our first piece of iron coming through. Notice the iron is already down to 93 degrees because it dumped all of its thermals into this metal tile, which then heated the rust in this tile. And it's going to continuously do that. Like we said, it takes a little while for this system to charge. Yeah, this iron's already at -2.5 degrees. I suppose before I let people start running through the magma shaft, I could send some obsidian through, which would then heat these metal tiles up and then get the steam going. Oh yeah, and this is the good and hot obsidian. Even the obsidian's already at -13 coming through all this, but it should turn that thermal aqua tuner on, which should slowly start heating this water up. Let me run this for just a little bit. All this obsidian is very nice and hot, so hopefully I can get this whole room into a steam bath. Right now I have this timer sensor set on once every 30 seconds to open the chute. And all said and done, the obsidian comes out at -2 degrees. But yes, run, thermal aqua tuner, run! I suppose I can also chill this down a little bit more. We'll say -20 here, just temporarily to get this thermal aqua tuner running. Notice also with this door shut, the igneous rock is heating up the water in here, which then it turns into flashes into steam, but either way, it's dumping its thermals into this metal tile, which goes into this metal door, which goes through these metal tiles, which also heats up the water. Oh, these thermal aqua tuners decided they wanted to shut off, because it's chewing through all this obsidian already. So no, we want obsidian that's -60 degrees. Our water is at 84 and climbing. The temperature shift plate in here is only at 90 degrees. It's going to take a lot of steam and work because not only are we heating up all of this, we also have all these temperature shift plates that are sitting very, very chilly. It's the reason why the water hasn't started boiling yet, because this first layer of igneous rock temperature shift plates are also having to equalize in temps. Something I am seeing a little off. These tiles here are 910 degrees, which is not what we wanted. They should not be sharing thermals. I'm not exactly sure what's heating these tiles up. There's no bridge connecting them, right? No conductive wire bridge. My only guess is it's interacting with these rail tiles. Comes in at 1460, goes back in at 1450. Yeah, they're dumping temperature into these tiles. I am thinking about actually lowering them. The only thing that should be transferring is the rust that has been counterflow heat exchanged through them. Yeah, let me get in there and do that as well. It's definitely not this conveyor bridge because the bridge itself is at minus 1.2. The rust is at minus 1.2. Where are you getting your thermals? Even this rail's rust is very, very hot. Down here in our steam room, we're starting to get some rain. Always good to see. Igneous rock's down to like 1200 degrees. Steam's at 111. So we're starting to equalize in here. This is going to be beautiful. My only guess is somehow the simulation is off by one tile because this rust should not have been interacting with this tile because that rail is not connected. Unless there's some sort of +1 distance from a rail tile combo, but I've never seen that. Yeah, these metal tiles are now at minus 60. Oh, I love nectar. So let's speed this up to say once every 5 seconds. Let's see what you can do then there, Thermo Aqua Tuner Nectar combo. Once every 5 seconds is pushing this system. We're down to about -7. So I am going to back it off a little bit. We'll say once every 10 seconds. But it's good because all of this water is turning into steam, which is exactly what we want to see. So I have no qualms about turning this system here on. So now this auto super will pick up this igneous rock and start sending on the rails. Now this is 1000 degrees and it's going to end up taking a lot of work from these steam turbines to be able to chill this out. So it's all going to depend on this rail system that somehow got reset. If it's below 200 degrees, you can then let it through. The igneous rock may not flow through very often, but now that there's a bunch of steam in here, I will turn this whole system back on. So if you are below 1500 and, what'd we say, 60 degrees, you can then open, I'll reset it so it dumps, and then we'll connect our automation wires in so we get some fresh magma. More hot rock gets dropped in here, and because it's just a little bit, we're not seeing any problems here. But if you make this even one tile to the right, and you're getting 200 kilos at a time, there is a chance that you'd form a solid igneous rock tile behind this mesh tile, which is none of the buenos. And now that we're equalizing here, these metal tiles are 170 degrees. Soon this thermal sensor will say, hey, it's too hot. Open this door. We're starting to get solid igneous rock forming, which is exactly what we want. So the counterflow heat exchanger is starting to work. Iron comes out, starts to heat this tile up. Now again, it's going to take it a long time to start exchanging heat across these tiles. But notice this rust is starting to warm up. Even this rust here is at 500 degrees. Now one thing I am waiting for is a little blob of molten iron to sit on this tile and stay molten iron. It'll take a lot of heat to make that happen, and the counterflow heat exchanger to be working perfectly. As you can see, we still have a lot of ways to go because like the rust in this tile is only 10 degrees. Let me fast forward it for just a second and see how we end up. Notice how much magma we've already burned through, and we drained through the heat in the magma since it's not as hot as magma as we'd like. But look at that molten iron just coming straight down, allowing more rust on the system, heats these tiles up. And already our first blade of steel tiles is at 700 and something degrees. The rust on this line is 200, 143, 100, and slowly starting to warm up, which will make this system more and more efficient as the counterflow heat exchanger starts heating up as well. I mean, as it is, the iron's coming out at minus 11 degrees. We do have some igneous rock coming out the back end of our debris chiller. It comes out of the steam room about 160 degrees right now. And after it's done with the debris chiller around 7 degrees, notice our steam turbines are doing great. Still not even hot enough in here to be able to tell them to run full time. Magma's dropping normal. It's functioning. Nothing's overheating. We're turning rust into iron. So I think I want to crank up the heat a little bit. I want to say 1570. So I'd like to get these tiles even hotter as the counterflow heat exchanger starts working more. Oh, now the iron's 800 degrees, 600, slowly heating all these tiles up. Love to see it. Now we are starting to heat up in the steam room. We're at 200 degrees, hence the reason why the steam turbines are running flat out. And remember, this system doesn't really have an opportunity to overheat either, because it's just going to keep drawing heat out of igneous rock. And if we're not drawing that heat out, it's not going to transfer more igneous rock in. If it gets too hot in here, above 250 degrees, it's going to open this door. And so we won't be transferring it out here either. I mean, this steam's already down to 500 degrees. I got a good example for you as the magma drops in. Decently hot, not as hot as I'd like it. Like I said, if we had 1750 degree magma, the system would work even better. Notice the tiles are quickly heating back up. Iron does form there, but as soon as it does, more rust is coming in, which is cooling the whole system back down, which is, I suppose, as it's supposed to be. I mean, this rust here is already at 600 degrees. The igneous rock on this line, 249 degrees. Up on the top row, it's already down to 209. I'm going to do it. I'm going to call this a success. Now to capture its magnificent in a screenshot. I think that looks about good, huh? Well, I hope you've enjoyed this rust melter build as much as I had tinkering and designing a couple of different methods until I finally found one that I was confident enough to show you. And I hope you enjoyed our chill series. For those of you who saw the community post on YouTube a few days ago, you can probably guess what the next ONI series is going to be. I'm going to be trying to sprinkle in some other games as well, but I do promise you, you are going to love the next ONI series. So until next time, much love, happy gaming, and I'll talk to you soon.